Hello guys, what's up? This is Mortaza. Welcome back to a Coder's Journey. In this episode, I'm going to talk about generics in TypeScript. If you are familiar with generics from other programming languages, like for example C#, you will see that the concepts are very similar, right? So basically, generics allow us to work with different data types without specifying upfront the data types that we want to work with. So suppose, for example, we have a method, right? We have a function, right, called swap. And this function swap needs to change the values of two, parameters. So for example, I'm going to say first parameter, right, which is of type number. And then I'm going to add the second parameter of type number as well, second parameter of type number, right? And what I can do in the body is to, for example, do the swapping. So for example, I can declare temp as number equals first parameter, and then I'm gonna say second parameter is first parameter, and then I'm gonna say this should be first parameter, second parameter, right? And then I'm gonna say second parameter temp. So basically in this method I am changing the values which are stored into these two parameters, right? The first parameter and the second parameter. By declaring a temp variable, I am first assigning the value in the first parameter to temp, and then I'm gonna add second to first, and then I'm gonna add temp to second. Of course, this function works well with numbers. For example, if I come here and declare num1 and assign 2, and then num2 assign 4, right? I can go on and swap num1 and num2, right? But what if I want to have a function which swaps two parameters of type string? So basically I cannot do that, right? So I cannot come in and say my first name and my last name, and then this doesn't work. It tells me that type string is not assignable to parameter of type number, so I can't do that, right? So I would need to, basically the first solution would be to have another version of this method called swap string, and then I'm gonna change these variables of type number to string, and then I'm gonna do the swapping, and then whenever I want to swap strings, I'm gonna use swap string, and whenever I want to swap numbers, I'm gonna use swap, right? So basically this is not a good way of doing this, right? Because it leads to a lot of code duplication. And whenever I want to, for example, swap another type, I'm gonna do the copy pasting again, and I will have a lot of duplicated code. So basically this is the scenario where we can take advantage of generics. So I'm gonna get rid of these code, right? I'm gonna change this method to a generic method so that it can work with any data type. And with one single method, I can change or I can swap regardless of the type of the parameters. So this is the way to do it. First off, I'm going to declare this method as generic, and then I'm going to say that first parameter is not of type number anymore, it is of type t, and t will be defined later, and second parameter is of type t, and the return type is a t and t, right? So this is the thing that I'm going to return. And of course, in the body, I can go and return b and a, not b and a, second parameter and first parameter, right? So this is the way to declare a generic swap function. You are not defining the type parameter, the data type of the parameters up front, right? You are telling TypeScript that the type is t is generic, and t can be anything else. You can, for example, substitute t with s, doesn't matter, right? You can change these to s and it is perfectly fine, right? But it's a convention to use t because t is the, first letter of the letter type, or template as it is sometimes referred to. Anyway, now I can go on and say, for example, I'm gonna const swapped, for example, numbers, and then I'm gonna say swap 3 and 4. And then I'm gonna say CLG swapped numbers. This is exactly how generics can help us. And now I can go on and copy paste this and say swap strings, and then I'm gonna put in my own first name and my last name, right? And of course, I am swapping the strings here. So as you can see, by the way, I can go on and assign this as well, but TypeScript will infer that I am working with numbers based on the data type of the parameter, so I don't need to do that either. So basically, this swap strings or swapped numbers are working with the generic function swap, which can basically work with different data types and do the same thing. Of course, in the output of this method, we are returning an array with 2 elements. And the way that we are constructing the array is that we are first putting in the second parameter, and then we are putting in the first parameter. In addition to generic methods or functions, we can have generic classes as well. Let me give you a simple example of a generic class which is able to store a generic value. So in order to create my generic class, I'm going to call it box of t, right? This is the way to declare a generic class. And then in the body of the class, what I can do is to create a value of type t, right? And then in the constructor type t, right? And then in the constructor, what I can do is to say that, for example, this is the initial value, and then I'm going to set this value to initial value, right? And then, for example, I can have a public method, public get value, right? Get value is going to return t, whatever t will be. And then in the body, I'm going to return this value. And then I'm going to have a public set value, right? And it's going to be a new value of type t, and of course it will return void. And then in the body, I'm going to say this value is new value. So this is an example of a generic class. Now I can go on and create an instance of this class. I'm going to say, for example, const number box, right, is going to be a new box of number. And then in the constructor, I'm going to add my number 13. And then I can get to the number by saying number box dot get value. And this is the way to work with a generic class. I can also say const string box, and for example, go on and create a string, and in the constructor I can add in my own first name and last name, right? And the same way I can read number box, a string box dot get value. And of course I can go on and change the value by, for example, saying number box dot set value 100. So basically I have declared a single class called box, whose sole responsibility is to store a single value, right? And I am using the generic version of a class, and this allows the class to work with a wide range of data types. So the data type here is a string, it is a number, and here it's a string, right? And of course I can use this box class with other data types as well. So in this video, we kind of talked about generic methods. We first saw an example of using a non-generic method and the challenges that we have when we are working with a non-generic version of a method or function. And then we declared a generic function. We saw how it works, right? And then we saw an example of a generic class which is able to store a wide range of different values in a single property called value. And that is it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. If that's the case, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, A Coder's Journey, and I will see you in the next one.